If you would turn to the 30th chapter of the book of Deuteronomy, that's where we're going to spend our time today. I'll reference a couple other places, but for the sake of getting out of here sometime before tomorrow morning, I'm going to limit it to these passages here. Today is Father's Day. And I guess today I would like to talk to you about the hard part of being dad. We dads do a lot of things. I've taken the kids fishing. I've been there at their basketball games and their baseball games and taught them how to bowl and hunted with them and worked with them. Those are the good things about being dad. But folks, sometimes there are other things which are not so easy. Listen to Deuteronomy 30 and beginning here in verse 11. For this commandment which I command you today is not too mysterious for you, nor is it afar off. It is not in heaven that you should say, who will ascend into heaven for us and bring it to us, that we may hear it and do it. Nor is it beyond the sea that you should say, who will go over the sea for us and bring it to us, that we may hear it and do it. But the word is very near you, in your mouth and in your heart, that you may do it. I want to start right there. God begins here delivering this commandment to his children and delivering an ultimatum, if you will, to his children. And he begins by telling them that what he's about to ask of them isn't that hard. It's accessible. This is something that I'm afraid we dads need to spend a little more time at understanding. It's a complicated world we live in. And if you watch television and pay attention to the internet and social media and all of that, you can get the idea that this world is pretty complex. But the fact of the matter is, folks, the world's not any more complex than it ever was. I remember talking to my dad about kids. This is before I had any, right? And I was talking to Dad, and I said, Dad, I'm really worried about having kids. And he said, why is that? And I said, well, things are so much harder. And kids are so much different. And Dad said, no, they're not. They're not a bit different than I was, not a bit different than you were. And I said, well, what are you talking about? Of course it's different. And Dad said, no, it's not. He said, a kid today will do just exactly the same thing that I would do when I was a kid. And I said, well, what's that? And he said, anything you can get away with. You know, folks, to a large extent, it is that simple. Your kids will do what you let them get away with. They will. And I'll tell you something else, and this is an old axiom, of course, but the least you expect out of your children is the most you can hope for. The least you expect out of your children is the most you can hope for. If you expect your kids to behave and to live and to work and to study in an excellent manner, then you'll probably get something pretty close to that. But you know what? If you put no expectations on your children, then you're going to get that in spades. That's exactly what you're going to get. If you are constantly lowering the expectations that you have of your children because, my golly, everything's so hard now, isn't it? And everything's so different now, and everything's so complex now, and everything's so confusing now. If you keep lowering the expectations that you have for your kids, you won't be disappointed. They'll meet those expectations. Every time you lower them, they'll lower their performance to go right along with you. I know this isn't popular. Are there differences in how children behave today than there were years ago? Well, yes, there are, but I'm going to lay that here in just a moment right at Dad's feet, because that's where it belongs. But in reality, our children tend to deliver on the expectations we put on them. I can tell you, going back into high school and thinking about how things were in school, that there were a lot of teachers that knew the truth about Highland High School. The truth about Highland High School was a whole bunch of those kids, they didn't care about school at all, because all they were doing was getting their diploma and their cap and gown, and then they were going to the family farm, and they had no interest in excelling at education whatsoever. There were others who just wanted to be out of there, and that's how they lived, and that's how they went to school. And you could see that in the teachers. One of the teachers that I liked a lot was Mr. Shoemaker. I've seen him a few times since being out of school, and I liked him a lot. But you know, one thing about Mr. Shoemaker was this. He knew that kids were only in his class because they needed 2.5 credits. That's all. He knew that. And he accepted that. And he would look through and he would say, well, here's a kid I'm going to focus on, and here's a kid I'm going to focus on. But most of them, they just came and went. And then another teacher, Mr. Ludlow, he expected something of us, and he got it. My first year at Highland High School, I believe there were 28 kids. And at junior high, when I was in junior high, when we started hearing about marching band, there were 28 kids in the high school band. 28 kids. That's all the musicians. That's all the flag girls and the drill team and the majorettes and even the non-musicians, the drummers. That was all of them. My friend Don's here this morning. He was a drummer. Only 28. By my senior year in high school, more than a quarter of the school was in the marching band. And it was because he put expectations on us. He expected excellence from his students. And he worked us like rented mules. And he got that performance out of us, because it was what he expected. Folks, you're going to have the same thing with your children. If you expect your children to let you down, well, hold on, they're going to do that. If you expect your children to be less or lesser than, then that's what you're going to get. Is it always the parent's fault? No. Because sadly, what's going to happen someday is your little child is going to become an adult. And when they become an adult, in our world today, they can do whatever they want. And they break free from the loving hand of parents. That's a shame. Because what we're asking is not that great. I work at a place where, you know what? If you can come to work most of the time, and work a good part of the day, nothing will hold you back. You are going to succeed like you have never thought before. Why? Because everyone there is slouching toward mediocrity. This is where we live today. We're not looking for things that are excellent anymore. Listen to the radio. Okay, I know I'm an old guy, right? But let's go back to like the Unchained Melody and compare that to what you hear on popular radio today. Is there any comparison? No. Because we don't expect near as much. It used to be, if you were going to make a radio or a record, you had to go to a recording studio, and there were people involved, and engineers and technicians, and there were processes. Well, now any schmuck can stand in front of a radio or a microphone, and they can make a recording. It's easy. Whenever we make it easier, folks, it's never better. But God tells his children here, I'm going to ask something of you, and it's not too much. He says, I'm not asking that much of you. And then look at Deuteronomy 30, beginning in verse 15. He says, see, I have set before you today life and good, death and evil. In that I command you today to love the Lord your God, to walk in his ways, and to keep his commandments, his statutes, and his judgments, that you may live and multiply. And the Lord your God will bless you in the land which you go to possess. Here's what God requires of us, folks, and I don't believe this has changed one bit. He says, see that I have set before you today life and good, death and evil. And folks, those are the choices that we will make every day and every day. Those are the choices that you make. You make that beginning when you step out of the bed tomorrow morning. You'll make that choice. What is my day going to be like today? Will I choose life? Or will I choose death? Will I choose good? Or will I choose evil? You know, very much in our world today, everything's became nebulous. There's no real good. There's just varying degrees of good. There's no real evil. There's just varying degrees of bad. Now you know that's not true. In virtually everything that you do, in everything that you plan to do, in every idea that's running through your head right now, it is either something that is going to lead you to life or something that is going to drag you to death. And everything that you are thinking and everything that you are imagining and everything that you are wondering, not right now, it is either good or it is evil. There's not these varying shades of gray. And my question is, where is Dad? Where is Dad doing the hard work? Where's Dad doing the hard work and saying, what you're doing, what you're proposing, what you're suggesting, what you're planning is good? Where is Dad doing the hard work and the even harder work of paying attention to what his children are doing and saying, hey, I'm going to tell you right now what you're doing is evil. Now, men, you owe this to your children. You owe it to your children to tell them these things that you are planning, these things that you are doing, these things in which you are engaged are good. Hey, if you've got a kid and they're doing good things, they're working hard, they're paying their bills, they're doing all the things that we used to think were just normal, if they're coming to church on Sunday morning, you let them know this is good. If they're committing themselves to Christ on a daily basis, you let them know this is good and I appreciate this about you and I would like to encourage this. And if they are not doing the things which they should be doing, you must let them know that that is bad. You know, I was thinking about this, and folks, I hate to even go here, because I worry that we have lost sight of good and evil to the point that we don't understand anymore. We have given all kinds of nice, cutesy, popular names to things that used to be evil. If a man would just lay around with one woman or the next, well, we called him a rounder. We called him no good. Today we call him baby daddy. And it's okay. He's baby daddy. That's all right. There's no wrong in that. Well, of course there's wrong in that. You know, if we can't teach our young men to control themselves and be something different than a dog in the street, that's our fault. because we have not taught them the difference between good and evil. If your daughter only has two choices, either unwanted pregnancy or abortion, that's your fault. Because you have not taught her to be decent and moral and upright. This is your fault. We need to stand up, men. I was watching yesterday, and out in front of a Supreme Court justice's house, there were a bunch of high school girls. Now, they are walking out in front of the Supreme Court justice's house because the Supreme Court would have the audacity to protect innocent human life. And these girls are walking up and down the street, and they've got blood painted on them, and they've got these babies that they're carrying, and their arm or their hands are zip tied together, and they're saying, "Don't force us to be incubators." Well, how about this, honey? How about you keep your knees together, and let's start there. Now, I'm sorry, and I know that may be somewhat distasteful. But why aren't daddies teaching that? Why aren't daddies teaching their sons to be decent and honorable? Why aren't they teaching that? Now, here's what dad ought to do. And if I had a daughter in that parade, this is exactly what I would do. I would go take her off of that street, and I would say, "Little girl, you're going to go home, and we're going to talk. Because there are obviously some things you do not understand." What about it, Dad? What are we doing? What are we doing? You owe it to your children. You owe it to your children to tell them, hey, you know what? It is wrong to take things into your body that alter your mind and alter your thinking. That's wrong. Don't do that. Don't live in such a way that you have to have something changing your world so that you can cope with it. That's wrong. When are we going to teach our children? When are we going to look at our kids and say, hey, you know what? If a man will not work, son, neither shall he eat. If you can't bring yourself to work for a living, that's wrong. That is wrong. And they learned that at home. I asked my dad, this is when I started in junior high. Now, you got to be from Highland to understand this, right? Because we had the 3 different elementary schools, and we all went together, right? And so when we all got together, we all ended up with new friends that we didn't know before. And some of those friends, some of them had parents that were executives at Nationwide and stuff like that. And they got allowances. And I thought this was a pretty good concept. And I looked at my dad one night and I said, "Dad, just curious. You think maybe I could get an allowance?" And he says, "You already do." And I was like, "Now, am I missing this? Is this being put into a trust for me that I'm not aware of?" I didn't really know. And I says, "Well, Dad, what is my allowance?" He said, "I allow you to put your feet under my table and eat dinner, don't I, boy?" That was the last discussion we had about allowances. You know, when are we going to teach our kids? They are not deserving. They're not deserving. We don't owe them anything. We need to teach our children there are requirements. And Dad, here's the hard part about being a dad. This never ends. This never ends. Think about it. Are you going to continue to endorse your children's behavior by giving them their whole life? Is that something you're going to do their whole life? Just give it to them and put no expectations on them? "Oh, you know, my son, he turned his back on his family. He can't hold down a job. He does every bad thing you can imagine. He's staying 2 steps ahead of the law every minute of every day. But, you know, when I die, all of my stuff will go to him." Why? Why? Why would you do that? Goodness gracious, folks, why would you do that? Why would you endorse behavior that is improper and wrong? I can't do that. If my kids weren't operating their lives as they have been taught, as they learn from their grandfather and as they learn from their father, if they're not living their lives like that, I'm not going to endorse it, and I'm certainly not going to sanction it by giving it money. No way. There's too many other places I could give my money, which would have a good and positive impact. Folks, as long as we sit there as dad, and you know, I've seen so many pictures that I've received recently of, oh goodness, Sarah with her new baby, and oh golly, it melts my heart, and Haley with my grandkids, and Liz, and all of these kids that I knew when they were little, and you see a picture of mom sitting there holding the baby, and that has become, hasn't it, everything that it is to be mom. That's what it is. It's mom holding that newborn baby to her breast. Well, if we were to take a picture of dad in this world today, wouldn't it kind of be like that? Wouldn't that be what it is? Because that's what dad does. Dad pays the bill. Now, it doesn't matter what else dad does, but dad's there to pay the bill. And you just go to dad when you need money. You go to dad when you want this. You go to dad when you want that. Folks, how have we gotten so twisted in our understanding of what it is to be a father? If you want a grand example of what it is to be a father, look at the Father God. See, I have set before you today life and good, death and evil. In that I command you today to love the Lord your God, to walk in His ways and keep His commandments, His statutes, and His judgments, that you may live and multiply, and the Lord your God will bless you in the land which you go to possess. If you look in the book of Proverbs, you see so many times Solomon writing to his children and say, listen to the law of your father, listen to the law of your mother, and live and prosper. He says the same things. These things go hand in hand. I'll tell you something, those of us who are still children of parents, mom and dad always have your best interest at heart. Even if they're doing the completely wrong thing, I can still say that I know very few parents that didn't have the best interest of their children at heart. Solomon says again and again, over and over, oh kids, I want to see you do well. Listen to what I tell you. Oh children, I want to see you prosper. I want to see you do well. Write my law on your forehead. God says here to His children, you keep my commands, you keep my statutes, you observe my judgments, and you will live, you will multiply, and the Lord your God will bless you in the land which you go to possess. For a long time, a lot of people thought that just because we were positioned favorably between two oceans, and just because we had a mild climate and things like that in most of our country, that there was no way we couldn't succeed. Look around. Look around. The reason why America was successful, the reason why America was decent, is because men bowed the knee to their Father God, and children respected their fathers who cared for them. Folks, we are in a mess, and that mess begins at the feet of fathers. I saw something I could not believe on Facebook the other day. Someone wrote this on Facebook, and I don't know that this is word for word, and I don't necessarily even know that I want to identify it word for word, but they wrote something to the effect of, I need to retire, or I need to get disability. I'm tired of working. that something? I need disability, or I need some sort of retirement because I'm just tired of working. I'm tired of working too. But you know what I found out is if I don't work, they'll come and take all my stuff. You see? And I won't be able to feed my family. And I won't be able to put gas in my truck. And I won't be able to do the things that we need to do. Last week, a lot of us lived for some period of time without electricity. Electricity's cool. I'd like to make sure that I have it. So I pay the bill. And to pay the bill, I work. Come on, men. What are we teaching our kids? What are we teaching our kids? I have a lot of guys that work for me. They can never be bothered to come in for overtime. Nothing is their responsibility. And I desperately want to look at them and say, what kind of an example are you setting for your children? I'm not saying you work yourself to death and keep yourself away from your children and your family, but I'm saying what kind of an example are you setting? You know, so many of us can talk about our parents, and I know Rod can do this, and Gary, and I know certainly this is my experience. I can talk about my dad, and I can say, you know what? I remember my whole growing up until it got to the point to where Dad was legally blind. Every morning, he was sitting at 5 o'clock out at the kitchen table, drinking a cup of coffee, getting ready to go to work. I don't care if there was a foot of snow outside, didn't matter. If it was really hot, if he had things he wanted to do, did not matter. He was there and he was going to work. I didn't really understand what motivated my dad, and I didn't really understand what it was like, inside my dad's head. Until he told me the story of something horrible that happened. He was duck hunting on Delaware Reservoir. And his best friend, he was playing around with the boat, and the water temperature was ridiculously cold, and Dad's buddy, he just gave the boat full throttle, and the boat capsized. And when the boat capsized, it hit my dad's friend Jim and hit him in the head, knocked him out, and he drowned and died that day. And Dad swam halfway across Delaware Reservoir, and we were standing at the place where he came up on the shore. And he said, I will never forget feeling those weeds, my feet in the weeds coming up on the shore. He said, the whole way along, I was thinking, I cannot leave your mom, and I can't leave you boys without somebody to provide for them and somebody to take care of them. And I didn't think I was going to make it, and I didn't think I was going to make it. And he said, and when I started feeling those weeds on my feet, he said, I knew everything was going to be okay. And I'd be able to take care of you boys. Dad, put their needs ahead of yours. In a short period of time, dads, we're going to be gone, and they're going to be left to do the important things. They're going to be left to do important things like plant the crops, like build the roads, like make the stuff, whatever the stuff might happen to be. They're going to be left to do the important things like keeping the church doors open and spreading the gospel of Jesus Christ. The hard part about being a dad, so far, it's been pretty easy. Hey, kid, do what I tell you. Do what I tell you, and you're going to live. Do what I tell you. Avoid evil and go toward that which is good. But here comes the hard part about being a dad. How much has God put up with from the children of Israel at this point? 40 years in the wilderness, oh my goodness, everything you can imagine, taking them through all sorts of horrible things and seeing them succeed rarely and fail quite often. And even after all of that, he says, I want to see you live. But here's the thing, Dad. Here's the hard part about being a dad. He says in Deuteronomy 30:17, but if your heart turns away so that you do not hear and are drawn away and worship other gods and serve them, I announce to you today that you shall surely perish. You shall not prolong your days in the land which you cross over the Jordan to go in and possess. Folks, there are two sides to Dad's love. I always think about the prodigal son, and the story is really not the prodigal son, is it? It's the prodigal dad. That's the story. In the parable of the prodigal son, Dad didn't need to think about it when the son came home, did he? He already knew what he wanted to do. I can imagine Dad waking up every morning and wondering where that son was. Waking up every morning and wondering what he was doing. Going to bed every night and praying to God, oh God, I hope my child is okay. I wish he was here so I could take care of him. I wish he was here so that he could benefit from my work, because I worked for him. But his son walked away, turned his back. But you know what? When that son came home, Dad knew exactly what to do. He put a robe on him. He put a signet ring on his hand. He killed the fatted calf and had a celebration and a feast. Why? Why is that? It's almost as if Dad was waiting all the time for the son to come home. Well, that's the hard part about being a dad. The hard part's telling him the truth. I'm asking something of you. It's not impossible. It's not even hard. I'm asking something that's relatively easy. But if you can't bring yourself to do it, there will be ruin for you. Have you ever told your kids that? Have you ever taken the time to tell your kids or the young people that are around you, the young people that look to you, the people that look up to you, have you ever taken the time to tell them, hey, honey, I want you to know something right now. If you don't do what's right, it's going to be horrible. It's going to be horrible what happens to you. If your heart turns away, God says, so that you do not hear, and are drawn away and worship other gods and serve them, I announce to you today that you shall surely perish. That's what it means to be a dad. It so amazes me how I hear from all of these parents that they don't know what their kids are doing. I don't know what my kids do. I don't know what my kids do. I do. I pay attention. And not only that, I snoop. And not only that, I surveil. I pay attention to what my kids do. Folks, in terms of monetary return, they have been the worst investment I have ever made. But in terms of raw investment, I have invested my heart, my body, my soul, my money, everything I have. And you know what? I still haven't invested as much in them as God has me. What you were talking about this morning. I'm with you, Frank. You asked me to give my son for some rebellious, awful person. No. I'm with you, Bill. It's too much. You, my friend, and I have asked a lot of a holy God. We've asked a lot of him because we have not done what was easy and kept his commands, because we have not kept his statutes and observed his judgments. The right condemnation for our sin lays against every one of us today. But could you imagine, as you stand on the porch of heaven and look down, you see your very real son, very human, but perfect and sinless, writhe and struggle for every breath he takes on an evil Roman cross. I'm sorry, my friend. No, that would be too much. Couldn't do it. But God did. Because his perfect son was to be but the firstborn among many brethren. And God wanted to increase his family, and God wanted to adopt and bring into his family thousands, millions, billions, in numbers far exceeding the sands of the sea. Who could be his children. Oh my gosh. In this world today, everything's a shade of gray. Everything's a little bad and a little good. Have you ever noticed that if you look carefully in the scripture, God doesn't do that much? There aren't a lot of shades of gray in this passage I've read to you today. God says very simply, I set before you today life and good, death and evil. No middle ground. He doesn't say, I set before you life and pretty good, death and kind of evil. No. He says, I set these things before you, and this is the choice you're going to make. And boys and girls, we're all going to make this very simple choice. Will you choose life and good or death and evil? Well, the preacher said that I'm evil. No, the preacher didn't say that. First of all, you know it already. I don't need to tell you that. Preacher said that in your heart is bound up evil and sin and condemnation. Preacher said God gives you the choice, life and good or death and evil. It sounds a lot like Mark 16 when you think about it. In Mark 16, Jesus says, he who believes and is baptized will be saved, but he who does not believe will be condemned. It amazes me that passages like this cause people such consternation. It seems very simple, doesn't it? There is associated with belief obedience, and with obedience belief, and if you believe, then you'll be saved. And if you don't believe, well, pretty simple. It's almost as if Jesus sets before us today life and good and death and evil. What will you choose? Our invitation hymn today, I don't really know that I'm all that familiar with, but we're going to try. Page 570, Happy the Home When God Is There. But as we sing and commit our hearts again to the Lord, I'd ask you, if you have a decision to make for the Lord, that you come forward as we stand together and sing this old hymn. But before we do, let's pray.